Who controls the IMF? The IMF is controlled by major funders, the USA and Europe. That is why the World Bank president is from the USA. The IMF chief is from Europe. They'll never get from Africa. Where the unfairness come in. Before 1876, we used to have what is known as the metallism monetary system. Metallism, bimetallism, on monometallism. That is before 1876. So before 1876, we had a system where either gold or silver were the medium of exchange. That was the money that we were using. So you find that countries were using maybe only silver or only gold, one metal. That was monometallism. Countries used that used both gold and silver were known to be on the double standard, and they were using both metals as the primary medium of exchange. Now, because money was heavy to carry, imagine carrying a lot of gold, carrying a lot of silver. They said, okay, let's create paper money. But this money was going to be backed by gold. Then we moved to the classical gold standard. That is between 1876 and 1914. We moved to the classical gold standard. In the classical gold standard, a country printed paper money, but that money was backed by gold. That's why today's gold in Africa, Zambia's gold, is very important. And you should please memorize or please record what I'm going to say. Remember this transition or evolution of the monetary system that I'm going to explain to you. That's why you are going to understand why gold, why minerals are very important. So the best monetary system that we had is the one that we had metallism. Either monometallism, one metal as a medium of exchange, or two metals, gold and silver, double standard, which were the medium of exchange. This money had no inflation because money had worth, it was worth something itself. Gold has value. So we were trading in value money. So because it was gold and silver were too difficult to carry and they were precious metals, countries decided to say, let's print fiat money. Fiat meaning fake money, but it should be backed by the gold content. So for example, the British pound, 6 British pound were equal to 1 ounce of gold. 30 US dollars were equal to 1 ounce of gold. So exchange rates were determined by the gold content in both currencies. So that was also a perfect monetary system because countries, for you to print more money, you needed more gold. So there was no inflation. But with the starting of the First World War in 1914, countries abandoned the gold standard, no international movement of gold. Have you seen? They abandoned the international movement of gold because he who had gold controlled the world because gold is value. So they stopped the movement of what? Of gold. And then we moved to interwar period. Interwar period from 1914 to 1944. During this period, there was hyperinflation, no proper monetary system. The US dollar, because the US entered into the war, the First World War towards the end of the war, and the Second World War towards the end, their economy suffered less losses, and there was no war that was actually fought on US territory. So this is where, those days, the global dominance was the UK, France, Germany. But this time, the USA started gaining momentum. And in 1945, after the end of the Second World War, 1944, 44 nations met at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, in USA, and they created 2 institutions. One, they created the World Bank. At that time, they only had one unit, the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development. This bank was created to specifically fund the reconstruction of Europe. Africa was nowhere in the picture. The World Bank was created to specifically fund the reconstruction of Europe. Then the other institution that was created was the IMF. The IMF was created to specifically control the international monetary system. So the international monetary system which is defined as the laws, mechanisms that govern the institutional framework in which international movement of capital is accommodated, exchange rates are determined. That is the international monetary system. How you determine exchange rates, how international payments are made, how international movement of money is made. These three things, the IMF control exchange rate determination, international movement of money, and international payments. So when sanctions are imposed on countries, for example, like Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe will never create its own currency because they are not in good books with the IMF. Meaning, it will be difficult for them to make international payments. It will be difficult for them to do what? To maintain proper exchange rates, to maintain a currency. So because they are not in good books with Bretton institutions and Western countries, Zimbabwe will never have peace. No matter how much gold Zimbabwe will have today, Zimbabwe will never stand up. Who controls the IMF? The IMF is controlled by major funders, the USA and Europe. That is why the World Bank president is from the USA. The IMF chief is from Europe. They'll never get from Africa. They'll never get. These are two institutions that were created to fund infrastructure development. That is the World Bank. The other one to control the international monetary system. These two institutions are domiciled in the USA. These two institutions are controlled by the USA, controlled by Europe. So they control the international monetary system. So after the Second World War, we moved to a Bretton Woods monetary system. Only the US dollar was the reserve currency. Other countries were to maintain stable exchange rates relative to the US dollar. Only the US dollar could be converted to what? It could be exchanged for gold. All the gold that was there in the whole world was moved from other countries to Fort Knox in the USA. Now, the USA did not think that Europe was going to develop quickly. So by 1971, Japan was up and running, Europe was up and running, and they started getting the dollars that they had in reserves, taking to the Federal Reserve to say, give us back gold. So President Nixon in 1971 closed the gold window. The USA could no longer accepted the exchange of the US dollar for gold. After that one, we have now the current exchange rate arrangements. The IMF now, imagine up to 1971, the IMF had nothing to do with Zambia. It had nothing to do with the African countries. We could not get money. From the 1970s, 1974, somewhere there, the IMF now, African countries and non-oil producing countries were given greater access to IMF funds. When did Zambia's economy start following? Or when did African economy start following? In 1974. When we started getting money from the IMF. Does that ring a bell? I'm not saying the IMF is a bad place, but I'm saying when we started following certain principles. So the international monetary system is designed in such a way that it is controlled by developed countries. So if these people put sanctions on you, no matter what you do, you never stand up. Zimbabwe will never, they have tried to come up with a currency. It will never be stable because that currency has no blessing of the IMF. Now, let me tell you now about how the international monetary system works. The international monetary system works such that everything we do is centralized in the developed world. If you are buying copper, if you are buying gold, if you are buying cobalt or anything, they are going to say London Metal Exchange Rate prices, LME. Zambia wants to buy copper from Congo. We are going to use a price determined in the UK. The UK mines zero copper. The UK has no copper. So why should prices be determined in London? When you look at oil prices, they are determined in what? In the USA. There is no commodity, even coffee, that there's no commodity that Africa makes, despite the fact that Africa has the largest mineral resources reserves. There's no exchange that determines prices for our minerals. Because of that, you will continue fighting to change governments. You will never go anywhere because you do not control anything. We live borrowed lives. I am not against what is happening. I'm just saying we need to be given the respect that we deserve. We need to be given a fair vote in these institutions. So there's what is known as the international capital markets. International capital markets, these are markets for long-term funding, payback period of more than 1 year. There's also the international monetary markets, repayments of less than 1 year. Now, when Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Ghana, Singapore want to borrow on the international bond market, a bond market can either be a Euro bond market or a foreign bond market. I won't go into the details, that is for my classroom. So these markets, Zambia itself cannot go and issue bonds on that market. Because of this, the way the international monetary system has been structured, Zambia needs to appoint an advisor to go and issue Euro bonds or foreign bonds. South Africa has to do the same. Even the USA has to do the same. But the USA rarely issues bonds because the international capital markets are domiciled in their country. So they just issue treasury bills. The way we issue treasury bills in Zambia. So their market, foreigners are in the USA because the international capital markets are already there. So governments do not just move. They don't just move to go and issue. No, we have experts in the ministries, let's go and issue. No. What governments do is that they go and get advisors. Those advisors are the ones that help to go and issue those bonds. You know, let me just ask somebody to bring me my charger. My laptop, I miscalculation of let me see if I can get a charger. Just wait. This is very important. This is very important. Just wait. Masha, please see me at notebook, something. Somebody is going to bring me my charger. This is very important, ladies and gentlemen. So what normally happens is that for us to issue bonds, we need an advisor or we need the bank to act as an agent. Those banks are the ones that are going to guarantee that all our bonds are going to be done, are going to be bought. Otherwise, if they don't buy our bonds, we would have spent a lot of money trying to issue these bonds, and it's going to be bad on the reputational risk of a country. So what normally happens is that you go and get these advisors and you issue your bonds, you borrow. Even in Zambia, if you want to issue shares on the Lusaka Stock Exchange, you're going to need advisors. Those advisors can be either Zambian, because this is Zambia, but if you're going to list on the New York Stock Exchange, there is no Zambian company, there are no Zambian advisors that have experience to issue to go and help you to go and issue bonds. There's nobody. We don't have such investment banks. Let me just connect this. Thanks very much, colleagues, for waiting. So where was I? So if you are issuing papers on the international capital markets, you need to go and find advisors that understands markets there. Unfortunately, in Zambia, we do not have investment banks that have the experience on international capital markets. Zambia has issued Eurobonds on the international capital markets. Zambia, Pangea Securities, my friend, they can't even negotiate in South Africa. That is Aaron Mondok. I'm telling you the truth. We have a misconception here. We have a lot of people in Zambia that are able to join or to work for an investment banker who can advise and help in debt restructuring. But very few Zambians have that extent, that experience. Colleagues, get me right. I'm a patriot. But I do not confuse. I cannot just say out of patriotism, no, Zambians should go and negotiate. The only people that can help you with debt restructuring are investment banks. Those investment banks are supposed to be top-notch international investment banks. Because when you go into debt restructuring, the result should always be positive. If it's negative, the economy can be hit hard. Habaazoka, members of EAZ, have enough papers, credible papers, and they can go and work for an international investment bank that can do what? That can advise government. But we have no company in Zambia that is able to play the role of what? Of an advisor. This is very important. People we have, even me, I have negotiated and structured deals in my life worth over $600 million. But I alone as an individual, I am not adequate enough. One, I don't have a banking license. I'm an individual. Two, I don't have an international office in New York. I don't have an office in London, in Milan, in Beijing. Mind you, this advisor will have to be in New York, where we have Eurobonds, in London, where we have commercial debt, in Nairobi, where we have commercial, in Johannesburg, in Beijing, where we have Chinese debt, in Australia, or any other country where we have debt. So the price, imagine if they selected 50 Zambians. Let's assume they selected 50 brilliant Zambian guys to say you are advisors. Then they send us to New York. From where are we going to start from? We will have to start introducing ourselves. My name is Lubinda Habaazoka. This is my brother Chiwambakanyama. This is Professor Sasa. That is my friend, I don't know other economists. Okay, so where are you from? We don't have an investment bank. We are not investment bankers. But what government can do, Ministry of Finance can do, is to attach us Zambians to Lazard so that we can start also learning and start creating networks. To negotiate debt restructuring of 11 billion, $5 million is not enough. I'm telling you, you're going to need legal advisors. You're going to need financial advisors. You're going to need technical advisors, insurance advisors. You know, the loan contract. Loan contract has insurances. You need to go, in some cases, to go and look for Eurobond holders. Do you know what a bond is? A bond is an instrument issued by one issuer, in this turn, the Zambian government, to more than 1,000 lenders. These are those, they don't even know each other. So this Lazard will start looking for each and every Eurobond holder, trying to talk to them to negotiate for a debt restructuring. Now you need to convince the Chinese, you need to convince the Indians, you need to convince the Russians, you need to convince the USA guys, you need to convince thousands and thousands of Eurobond holders. We have people capable of working for investment banks that can go and negotiate, but we need an experienced institution. The bank that can do that in Zambia is Standard Chartered Bank. But Standard Chartered Bank alone cannot do it. They can only do it with their parent company in London. APSA can do it if they partner with Barclays Bank. APSA alone cannot do it. Zanaco can do it maybe if they partner with Rabobank and maybe Deutsche Bank. The advisor on our Eurobonds were Barclays Bank, UK, Deutsche Bank, Germany, if you don't know. Even when we were issuing Eurobonds, we had advisors. So advisors in this term is not something that is new. You know, it's something that is needed. Yes, we have Zambians that are qualified to go and advise, but they have to advise under a company. So that company should be created. So let's encourage our banks. That's why I always tell our banks, we need to dominate Africa. We need to dominate the world. So Zanaco should start opening branches in London, in New York. They should open in South Africa. Why APSA is coming here when we can't go outside the country? NATSEV should convert into a bank and start opening branches, correspondent bank or subsidiaries outside the country. Let's transnationalize, bring the deposits from outside the country and come and lend them in Zambia at a lower rate. You see, that's what we need to do. So because of the biasness of the international monetary system, we needed an international bank. Unfortunately, that is how the international monetary system is created. Rating agencies. Rating agencies are the ones that attach the riskiness of a country. Look at how unfair they are to a country like Zambia. We are a developing country. People used our mineral resources to go and develop their countries under colonialism. Multinationals continue to milk us. We have tried to fight. They can follow up a Zambian for receiving more than $5,000 in the bank account, but they are failing to help us to track millions and millions of dollars that are leaving the Congo, that are leaving Zambia and Africa. More than $50 billion every year is leaving Africa as illicit financial flows. Nobody's talking about it. But no, you have corruption in Africa. You have no human rights in Africa. What is happening in the USA? They are looting. If the looting, remember when there was gassing in Zambia, countries started issuing travel advisory, don't travel to Zambia. There's a gassing. Have you ever heard an African country issue a statement today to say don't go to Europe and the USA and other countries because of COVID and because of the riots that are currently happening? No. Have you heard Moody's or Fitch downgrade those countries where those things are happening because of political risk? Political risk is when actions of citizens or governments of the host country can negatively affect business. What is happening in the USA now can negatively affect business because they are looting businesses. Have you heard Moody's downgrade anybody? Moody's, when we had the COVID, they said we are going to die in millions. Are we dying in millions? They said, even Bill Gates' wife said we are dying in millions. We are going to die in millions. Everybody said, well, but what's wrong with us? Who told you that you are not God to say we are going to die in millions? The rating agencies came exactly and started doing what? Downgrading us. They want us to be slaves. When they downgrade us, it means the interest rate we are paying on our debt increases. Now, are you normal for you to start increasing interest rates for countries you are saying they are about to default? Is that normal? In fact, rating agencies should advise, no, if these people want them not to default, reduce. Countries in Europe and the USA printed over 2 trillion US dollars and gave it to their companies. And they repaid their debts on treasury bills. And they gave to their own people. When a country, each country in the world should operate on equal rules. You collect your revenue, tax revenue and non-tax revenue, and you meet your obligations. Immediately you start printing money to meet your obligations. It means your credit worthiness has gone down. That is technically a default. You have defaulted, that's why you are printing money. When the Zambian government announces that they are going to restructure their debt, according to the definition of Moody's, Fitch, and these other international rating agencies, that is a technical default. And our ratings are going to be pushed to the dogs. But the USA has defaulted. They don't have enough revenue, non-tax or tax revenue, and they are printing over $2 trillion. But Moody's, Fitch, and these rating agencies give them the best ratings. Do you know why? They have a currency that was determined in 1944 at Bretton Woods that this is going to be the global currency. Whoever wants to buy gold, whoever wants to buy oil, whoever wants to buy copper need dollar. Now tell me, is that a fair monetary system? Is that a fair monetary system? Ladies and gentlemen, we have a lot of problems in Zambia. We have a lot of problems in the Congo and in Africa. We can talk about them. But the solution is not to be changing leaders. Leaders should be changed. They serve their terms, you bring another one. If you think the leader is not performing according to the way you want them to perform, you can vote otherwise. That's a democracy. And that's what we have chosen. I'm not saying we should not be changing leaders. I am saying we should never make it difficult for our own people. Corruption, thieves, what? We are forgetting the bigger picture. Corruption, we have NGOs that are sponsored from outside that are fighting corruption, that are fighting human rights. Mention an African country that is doing what? That is now fighting for human rights now in America where they are fighting. And please, Americans, you should understand me very clearly. I'm not anti-America. I love America. Its people are the best. But the international monetary system is not good. It's biased against Africa. Rating agencies are killing us. The international monetary system is against us. Zambia today cannot print money because there's going to be inflation. The USA can print money, UK can print money, and there'll be no inflation. Because those are the currencies we trade with on the international market. So allow us to trade in the yuan. Allow us to trade in the Zambian kwacha, in the South African rand. And I blame the African Union. I blame them. Sitting in Ethiopia there doing nothing. Let's have our own African currency. Let's also trade in our currencies. I blame South Africa, very big, huge economy. You can't say, let's be using the rand. Let's be using the kwacha. Why, if I want to go and buy something in South Africa, why should I have to get $1? Why are African Union leaders not speaking at that level to say, trop c'est trop, enough is enough, Africa first? Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you one thing about Africa. There's the Asia Development Bank. There's the European Bank. It's owned by Europeans. The World Bank, the major shareholders are developed Western countries. The African Development Bank, a bank that is supposed to fund poverty reduction in Africa, is owned by the USA, Britain, and other Western countries. The current president of the African Development Bank, the CEO, whatever they call him, the USA said, let him resign. That person is being investigated, not because an African country has spoken, but because the USA have said, let him get out. Which development are you going to have as Africans if you cannot own your own development bank? Which development? You can discover gold, copper, anything. Nothing will happen as long as you know not talk. We are fighting. Every day we insult each other on Facebook. Your friend has built 49 houses. Yes, even if it was corruption, but he has the houses in Zambia. He hasn't built them in Zanzibar. If he's stealing from government, get those houses, give them to the poor, put him in the cells. Don't burn those houses. But we should not hinder ourselves development. Whoever gets a bit of some money, no, he's a witch. No, he sold his heart to the devil. Let's pull each other up. We need to create wealth. As long as us Africans are going to be fighting, as long as us Zambians are not united, this Zambia belongs to us.